Hello, I'm Roger Bisby from SkillBuilder, and I've been fitting roof windows for more years than I care to reveal. And when I first started fitting them, there really wasn't any choice. But now there are any number of different windows out there, and to the untrained eye, they might all look fairly similar. But in the next few minutes, I want to show you why Keylite has now become my preferred window of choice. Now, it might surprise you to know, and it certainly surprised me when I found out, that the real culprit in cold bridging on roof windows is not the double glazing, but it's what happens around the frame, in what I call the gap. Now, why is that gap there? The gap is there because all manufacturers recommend a minimum of 20 millimeters around the edge to allow for adjustment, allow you to square it up in the opening. But what happens to that gap? That gap is actually a source of thermal bridging, and on a cold day that can actually lead to condensation around the frame. Now, we all know that houses are being sealed up and the moisture isn't escaping as it was, so if it's got any opportunity to find a cold spot and start condensing, it will. And of course, as we all know, condensation leads to ugly black mold, so suddenly your lovely window isn't looking quite so nice. So what do manufacturers do about it? They all acknowledge it's a problem, so what they do is they provide a thermal collar to go around the edge. Now, that thermal collar is sold as an extra, and in some cases that can cost you £30 or so, and of course if you're on a tight price, that's £30 that you might not want to pay. Well, I was talking to a merchant and they said to me, we can get the thermal collar, we can order them in, but we don't stock them because nobody asked for them, we just wouldn't sell them. So that proves that in a lot of cases that thermal collar isn't being fitted. Now, I've got an overriding principle, and that is that if anything's that critical in the building industry, it ought to be designed out. In other words, they ought to find a way of overcoming it so it's no longer the responsibility of the builder. And that's exactly what Keylite have done. They've taken responsibility for thermally insulating around the window by building in a thermal collar. Now, this insulation is an expanding foam which is actually set into the window at no extra cost. It comes as standard, and you can't actually complete the installation of the window without activating this thermal collar. And to do that, you simply pull the ripcord and the foam starts to expand, and it continues expanding for 24 hours. But you don't have to wait for 24 hours before you continue to line out the window and so on. You can carry on safe in the knowledge that this foam will continue to expand and fill that gap perfectly. So it insulates around that window absolutely 100%. So that's the thermal collar, but let's have a look on the window to see just how well it works. So that thermal collar is now happily expanding and will continue to expand on its own for 24 hours. But I really think that that unique innovation needs to be acknowledged and supported, because it's great to see a manufacturer taking responsibility for it rather than just passing the buck and blaming the builder. So I hope in this short video that I've shown you that Keylite have managed to make that window a lot easier to fit with that flick fit bracket and that spring loaded hinge. They've also managed to make it more thermally efficient out of the box with that built-in thermal collar at no extra cost, and of course it sits lower in the roof, so you're really getting bang for buck. But don't take my word for it, check it out with your merchant, and I think you'll find that this is a very competitive window.